Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Maryland Apex Accelerator webinar today. Hope you're all doing well. I'm your host, Yasmin Razak, and I'm the Marketing and Training Coordinator. Today, the webinar topic is contract administration, and it is led by Keisha Foster, who is the founder of Key to Life Professional Services, LLC. We'll get started very shortly, and there will be opportunities for you to ask Keisha your questions by typing them in the chat box on your screen. We will pause for Q&A throughout the 2-hour presentation. And as always, a copy of the slides will be sent to you after the webinar. And this is being recorded, so you will get a link to the recording as well. We will pause at the top of the hour for a 5-minute break. For those of you who are not familiar with the Maryland Apex Accelerator, it is our mission to help Maryland businesses to compete in federal, state, and local government procurement processes. Our services are no cost to you. So if you would like to speak to a counselor, please complete our application form on our website, marylandapex.org. And if you've been counseled before and you just need further advice, please email your counselor to request another meeting. Okay, well, that's enough for me today, I think. Good morning, Keisha. How are you?
Hey, Yasmin, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Sounds
Yes.
great.
All right. Hello, everyone. And as you all know, we've been doing the Navigating the World of Government Contracting webinar series. So we had to develop this webinar series for our small businesses who are really struggling to navigate and having a lot of challenges. So the training that we're giving and the accompanying notes will help you to get a better understanding of government contracting. So, and then if you haven't, and you're the first time attending this webinar series, we've already had one training in how to read and understand a federal or state or local solicitation. So be sure to go to our Maryland Apex Accelerator YouTube channel, and you will find all the recordings. And then we had another one on how to find a bid on 25 of less or less. That's the, basically focusing on our simplified acquisition. Then we dived into introduction to writing, proposal writing, level 1. So that way you know how to write a proposal. Now we're on the proposal. We did proposal level 2, going a little bit deeper into that janitorial services solicitation that we have been flowing through. And then we went deeper into the cost proposal development so you can really understand how to develop a proposal. And now today we're doing the contract administration, where we focus on post-award after the contract has been awarded. Because many a times you just won your contract, now what? Now, so what do we do now? All right. And then the last training of this year, we'll be doing for this series is the teaming and partner and subcontracting strategies. So make sure you stay tuned to those classes. And so because we understand the intake onboarding process can take time when you're trying to get your procurement counselor, that's why we have did this webinar series designed to equip you to give you that foundational knowledge. So when you get into that session, you hit the ground running. So that's what we're here to do, is help you to unlock success in government contracting. All right. So if you're new here and you haven't had listened to any of my presentations before, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, because I'm always on LinkedIn looking and putting out content as well. And if you're new to this webinar series, what I focus on is government contracting. I'm a coach and I'm a proposal consultant. And I have extensive experience in helping small businesses succeed in the government contracting space. I'm a former contracting officer / specialist with the Department of Defense, DOD, and I've managed several service contracts, admin contracts, you name it. I've done it. So that's why we've put together this training. I've mentored and educated contracting officers how to excel in the government the ones that were in the entrepreneurship or the internship program. And then a former contract Apex Accelerator counselor. So I've been there. I know what you're going through. I've been in your shoes. I've wore multiple hats, the business development, the capture, the marketing your business to primes, to agencies, and to other subcontractors. There's a method to the madness. You got to do your proposal writing. You got to run your day-to-day operations. And I understand those unique challenges. That's why we've conducted this series to help you navigate. And what I hope you gain from this is a practical approach to tackling the government contracting space. And then, because of that knowledge, I've been able to help many of my small businesses win $8 million in federal and state contracts, and hopefully to win more. And I've recently retired at the military. So I have a wealth of knowledge that I'm trying to share with the community. And so let's start with our introduction. What we're going to focus on, and also if you want to know more about me, I'll put in the remarks sections my bio, so that way you can always reach out to me later. All right. Now this class is for a continuation for the janitorial solicitation. Now we've won the contract, right? We did the proposal writing. We did everything. Now we've won the contract. Now what? So the introduction to the contract admin, then we're going to go over the post-award orientation. Then we're going to talk about the contract modifications and, just a few scenarios that could happen and that will warrant a contract modification. And what are some of the things to be looking for? Then performance and monitoring and the quality assurance, because you always got to make sure you're doing all your quality assurance. That way you can get a good rating at the end when the contract close out. So we need to talk about the contract closeout. We're going to conduct that practical exercise and then give you also more time at the end for question and answers. So if you have any questions. So, and then and that's why we always make sure we leave time for the questions and answers. So now we're going to go into our poll. Okay. Now, what aspects of contract administration do you find the most challenging? Is it understanding, interpreting contract terms and conditions? Is it how a contracting officer representative will monitor the performance and compliance of your contract? Is it managing contract modifications and changes? Or is it just closing out the contracts effectively? Or I'm new to contract administration and unsure where to start. So just put what you are so I can kind of gauge the audience and see what we need to focus on more. So it looks like most of you are just having troubles with understanding, interpreting the contract terms and conditions. So basically you have to really read the contract and then understanding how to interpret it. So basically the contract terms and conditions. And then we have a bunch of, and then the next one is I'm new to contract administration, so I'm unsure to where to start. So we're going to be covering all those things, understanding, interpreting contracts and conditions. So the way I work is, and then when you have those questions, make sure you put them in the chat, because what this training is a living training. So what happens is when I get all those questions that I didn't answer and we have this training again, we'll implement those questions in the chat that you had put in the question, especially if we run out of time or anything of that nature. So that way we can make sure that those answers get added into the training next time, so that way we can cover everything. All right, so let's move on. Okay, so let me stop the results for that. Okay, it's still sharing. Hold on, let me see. Okay, now stop sharing. Oh, it didn't want to go away. Is the result still sharing? I'm trying to move away from it and it's still there. Or do I not see it anymore? And it's just still showing on my
Yeah,
screen.
can't see it.
Okay, so it was just still showing on my screen. I had to
Yeah.
let me go to the next screen. Okay, hold on. All right. Right, so there we go. All right, there we go. So introduction to contract administration. All right, so basically the definition of contract, right? A contract is a legally binding agreement between two or more parties that establish enforceable obligations and rights. In the context of government contracting, a contract is a written agreement between government agency and the private entity, you, the contractor, for the purchase of goods, services, or construction. It is governed by the specific laws such as the Federal Acquisition Regulation. So, you know, everything we talk about is always the Federal Acquisition Regulation that includes details of terms and conditions that both parties must adhere to. So when you're looking for the FAR, what FAR is in FAR Part 42. And in that part, we're going to focus on the post-award management because, like I said, we've won the contract. So now we're focusing on the management and provide, and then what we'll do is provide the details and procedures for contract administration. It puts all the information in there. It talks about the auditing of services and then the contractor oversight. Now, these responsibilities ensure that contracts are fulfilled according to the terms, that the government interests are protected throughout the contract life cycle. And so basically the key elements of a contract is, you know, the offer, the one party proposes an agreement, and that's when you're looking at the RFPs, the RFQs, and so forth and so on. So that way you understand, okay, this is what we're at, this is the offer, this is what we're proposing. And so basically we just do that RFP so you can kind of know once you sign it, this is what you agreeing to do. So when you see those terms and conditions, is basically, it's like even when we're doing in the private sector, there's terms and conditions. We're creating a contract and we plan to stick to it. And then how we go through, because when you're dealing with services, there are different clauses and regulation. I mean, you know, the different, the clauses that's in there and provisions. And then you have in the construction, there's different because you have to worry about different inspections and different things of that nature. So each clause is determined on what the contract is and what it is for. So the more complex it is. Then you have the acceptance. The other party agrees to the terms of the offer. The contractor submits a proposal, and then that proposal is what they use to evaluate who can do the work the best. Who should we work with? XYZ Corporation, or should we go with ABC because they have properly went a proposal answering all the different things that we have asked for. So in this case, we were talking about the janitorial services solicitation that we have been going over throughout the series. And then the considerations. They want to know what exchange, you know, because you're going to have to be graded on this. And then both parties understand that they have agreed upon these terms and conditions via, if I'm going to get the daily, weekly, monthly, what is being asked of you. Then the legal purpose, the contract just makes sure it's in writing and must comply with the law. And then both parties are competent. So that's how you know that you have a contract. So once you sign that contract, and these are the types of contracts, you know, because we want to make sure we establish the post-award orientation. So that's basically dealing with the objective of the post-award orientation is to ensure compliance with the contract's terms, the deliverables, and performance standards. So basically you're conducting the post-award orientations, then they're assigning the COR for ongoing support, because now you're going to have someone overseeing the contract to make sure that you're doing what you said you were going to do. And then the monitoring the contract modifications and performance requirements. So a post-award orientation is a meeting held after a contract is awarded to ensure both the government and the contractor fully understand the terms and conditions and performance expectations of the agreement you agreed upon when you put in your proposal. So that's why people don't understand the importance of that proposal. When you're writing that proposal, you have to make sure you're articulating what we're going to agree upon. The initial orientation set the stage for successful contract management. So the purpose is to clarify those roles, responsibilities, and requirements. Who's doing what, right? To address any concerns that you have in the contract, or maybe you read something and you was not sure about what you read. You see, so that's what those are for, and it's to establish communication protocols. Are you only talking to the prime contractor and not the subcontractor? Who's the POC? Who's the contract manager? So forth and so on. And then the reporting schedule. Are you reporting it weekly? Are you reporting daily? Or is it just once a month? And then what does that report look like? What should be all included in that report? And then it sets the tone for a successful working relationship, because many a times you'll see when you go to these different orientations, you'll find out the culture, how they communicate with their contractors. Are they forthcoming? Do they leave the contractors out in the dark, or do they keep them well informed? Are the contractors allowed to be in certain meetings, or do they push the contractors off and then they're not allowed? So you're going to learn a lot from these orientations. Who is the most responsible person who's responding to your request? Or as the prime contractor, you have a role, so you got to be able to clearly articulate it. Also be able to contact that POC. Or are they dodging you, or are you not able to get a hold to someone? You're going to learn a lot from those post-award orientations on how they're going to work with their prime contractors and subcontractors. Now, key components. Okay, the first thing, your contract review. You're going to discuss the scope of work, the deliverables, and the timelines. So now every agency does it different. So don't assume that when I go to DHS, they're going to do it one way, but when I go to HHS, they may do something else, or IRS, Department of Treasury, anywhere. Every agency has a different way of doing the post-award orientation. So that's why when we're telling you to first get started, we're always letting you know, hey, just pick one agency and then decide who you're going to work with, because you have to learn them first. You have to be able to understand and articulate. And then the other agency might do it a different way. And then now you're confused because one agency does it this way and you haven't really learned that agency first before you went to another agency. Because too many times our small business are spread so thin that they are not able to really focus on learning this agency. Is a good agency for a small business to work at, or are they only looking for large established businesses, or people with more like 10 to 15 member teams with employees? Or are they willing to work with mom and pops, or solopreneur companies, or single members, or just small teams? So it's important to learn those things, and you're going to learn them when you start going to these different things of how they work with their people. So the performance expectations, they're going to define quality standards and key performance indicators, the KPIs, on how you be graded, because all that will be in the contract. So that's why it's important that you read that contract. And then they're going to want you to confirm the duties, so that way you'll meet who your contracting officer is. Who is your contracting officer representative? That's COR. And then they will know who their contracting staff member, who is their contracts manager, who are they going to, or their program manager manages all the contracts. So that's some of the things you're going to talk about. Then the administrative details. Then explaining. So say you might have some questions about the invoicing. This is the time to bring those up as well. And your reporting issues, or how you escalate any issues. So that way, say one of my workers didn't show up, and then it was reported. So how do we escalate any issues that we're having with our contract? They're going to want to know your risk management, identifying potential risks, and outline mitigation strategies. It's good to brainstorm these things before it happens, so that way you can have a plan, because when we're in the proactive mode, it's a little bit different when you're in the reactive mode. Now, we can't plan for everything, but the goal is to at least basically have a good understanding and a good plan on where we should begin. You know what I'm saying? So that's why it's important to understand these. And then the outcome. The post-award orientation is to ensure that all parties are aligned, and it kind of reduces the misunderstandings and sets the stage for successful contract performance. What you'll notice is, you'll know if you're going in there, the way the setting is and how you have been treated as a contractor, to know that this is going to be a good contracting opportunity, or I don't think this one is going to be a good fit, because it's going to let you know, oh, they don't work well, and I don't work well with a government agency that doesn't work well with me, because you can't do your fullest. Then I will tell you how it will go. So is this contract going to basically renew? Because you can kind of sense when you're dealing with people, because you can do it when you're an employee at an organization, when you're a subcontractor organization, you can kind of tell how the whole experience is going to be. So that's why it is so important to establish after this post-award orientation to see how it's going to be, because it's going to project how the whole contract is. Now, the contract modifications. So because contract administration, it encompasses so many things and so many roles, because you have the role as the government official, but then you have a role as the contractor, being the prime contractor for the contract. So because we have a major role in this part, it's important that you understand why contract modifications come in play. And that's in FAR Part 43. So if you want to dive deeper, my goal is to synthesize the information so you can understand basic concepts, but to dive deeper and to really get an understanding, you can always go back to the Federal Acquisition Regulation 43 is where we're talking about the contract modifications and the types of contract modifications. You got the bilateral modification, because the contract modification is a formal change in the terms and conditions. The scope, it could be the price or the performance timeline of an existing contract. So you have the contract, but they have to change it for some reason. Modifications are necessary when circumstances arise and that require adjustments to meet the needs of the government and to address any unforeseen issues. So, and the way they do that is the types of modifications are the bilateral modification. Now, this is the one where both parties agree to changes, such as a scope adjustment or a funding increase. And the unilateral modification, this one is initiated by the contracting officer for administrative changes or exercising options, right? So say they really loved your service, so they want to exercise the option year to bring you back for the next year. Now, an example of the janitorial contract. So now here's the scenario. The government agency overseeing a federal building has added a new sanitation protocol to its facility maintenance requirements, right? So they've changed something. Now, these protocols include the daily inspection of high-touch surfaces as door handles, elevator buttons, light switches, which were not included in the original janitorial contract. So that indicates you're going to have to change. So that will be a modification, because they're adding work, you see, because many times they'll add new things to the contract However, that was not in the contract. But when they do that, you have to make sure you let them know, because sometimes they do it unintentionally. Sometimes it was they wasn't paying attention or did not review the original award to see that that was not on there. They were just saying, "Hey, I need this to get done," but that was not on the original contract. So then all you would let them know is, "Hey, because this was not on the original contract," because it's a way to do things. When you see, just don't not do it, but you just let them know, "Hey, that was not on the original contract. Should we do a modification to add that scope of work?" So say that was not on there. On the original contract, it only required daily cleaning, the weekly floor bluffing, monthly restroom deep cleaning, and quarterly carpet extraction. Well, now they wanted to add the sanitation of high touch surfaces twice daily, morning and afternoon. So that means you're gonna have to hire someone else, right? That means you're gonna have to send somebody over there to do some extra work. So all that needs to be accounted for. That means the pricing is gonna change. Everything's going, say they wanted you to add an EPA approved disinfectant that was not on the original contract. So that's why it's important to understand when you have to do a bilateral modification, because you have added work scope to this work, more work to the scope of work. And then that means you're going to have to record keeping of sanitation activities is going to increase. So there's a lot of things that are going to increase. So there will need to be a bilateral modification. And the reason for the modification, because they're going to let you know what the reason for the modification is because the increased sanitation measures needed to prevent any, just like when we had the COVID 19, it really changed a lot of things. We had to really adjust the contracts. That was unexpected. And so that would be considered we would have to do a bilateral modification. So like the original contract, say it was 100K, right? So now that increased the contract because it's $15,000 to cover their additional labor, materials, documentation of costs. It could be more, but I want to keep the cost really general, so that way you can not get lost in me trying to get the cost, but you understand the principle behind it and the concepts for why. So then the new contract title, contract value will go up, but you want to make sure you're accounting for that. And so the performance schedule going to be impacted, because you have to adjust the schedules to accommodate for additional sanitation tasks. So that's why it's important to understand when the bilateral modification needs to be implemented, because it changed a lot and you had not accounted for that, nor the contracting officer accounted for that. So the modification would need to be, and then if they add any government furnished materials or anything, that would need, and then make sure you have it signed, make sure it's a sign, because you have to acknowledge that you agree to this modification as well. Okay, yes, we can do this, we will be able to. So both of you will be signing that contract, because it's going to impact the contract administration, the performance monitoring. That means the contracting officer representative review the sanitation logs during the weekly inspection. That means more work for the contracting officer representative. And then the recording requirements for the company. Now you must do a new section in the weekly reports to document the sanitation activity. So you understand why it's so important to, when you have a contract modification that is identified and everyone accepts the terms of the modification, because you're still working off the original contract. So you're not even implementing the new requirements. And then that way your compliance, because you want to be compliant, because any missed sanitation task would require a corrective action. And we'll talk about that more in today's training, to discuss when there is an issue that arises and then you need to address it. Now let's talk about the unilateral modification. So now this scenario, the contracting officer needs an update for the government billing address, for the invoice submission in a janitorial services contract. So now this is an administrative change and does not affect the scope of work, It does not affect the cost or the performance schedule, and therefore does not require the contractor's agreement. That's the one when only the contracting officer is going to do that. And then they will, of course, let you know the purpose of the modification is that we're updating the government's billing address for future invoices because you want to be able to get paid. So you want that modification to take effect so you know where to send the future invoices. And mind you, remember, nothing changed. The scope didn't change, the price didn't change, and the schedule didn't change. Only details change was the billing address. So the impact to the contract, there is no impact to the scope of work. There is no impact to the cost, and there's no impact to the performance schedule. And then we, as a contracting officer, they have the right, they have the authority to fire part 43.103 Bravo, that's B, which allows the contracting officer to make administrative change that do not affect the contract terms. So that is when they have to adjust any kind of admin stuff. You will get a unilateral modification. And the modification will be filed as an official contract record and distributed to all relevant parties. Okay, so that's why it's important that you understand the difference between a bilateral modification and a unilateral modification when it comes to modification. So that way you can understand that this one, unilateral modifications typically involve just minor administrative updates, such as contact information, maybe some accounting details or government furnished properties lists and so forth and so on. So that is why it's important to understand contract modifications, and I won't belabor this, but I wanted to make sure you understand the difference and when to do it. So don't feel like they're picking on your small business or as the prime contract. Your role is as the contract manager is to make sure you let them know, hey, this part of the work was not in the contract modification or was not in the original contract, and we will need a contract modification so we can get that work. So that way it's a win-win. The government is getting what they need, but you also are being compensated for providing additional services. And that's why it's important to understand that. Okay, so now let's keep diving deep. Now, the performance and monitoring and the quality assurance. Now, this objective is to ensure the contractor deliverables meet the contractual requirements and the quality standards. Many a times, you can always use the example too that the performance monitor is an essential process in the processes in contract administration to ensure that the contractor meets the terms, conditions, and performance standards outlined in the contract. So basically the tasks like regularly reviewing contract reports and deliverables, conducting the COR. Now, mind you, the COR is the person, the eyes and ear of a contracting officer. And if not, then I guess the contracting officer will be conducting it. But normally it's the contracting officer representative. They're regularly reviewing the contract reports and the deliverables, making sure that you are adhering to everything you said you were going to do. Some require a site visit and an inspection, and then the quality assurance program. So key components of the performance monitoring team is regularly reviewing the contractor's activities and deliverables to ensure the compliance with the contract scope of work, and then the key performance indicators. So conducting inspections, doing the audits, evaluations to track progress and to identify issues early, because the goal is to identify issues early to ensure that you don't get a cure notice or some kind of notice saying, hey, you didn't do this work, and then you're in danger of losing your contract, because the goal is to get the contract, not to lose it. But then once you get the contract, you have to maintain it and then make sure you're constantly doing the monitoring so you can identify when an issue arises early. Because one contract that we were on was the person previous to me taking on the role had not been providing the customer what the services they needed. And so therefore that was going to affect the CPARs. So soon as the prime identified that there was an issue, that person was immediately replaced. But then you still have to do the writing. So you have to let them know, send in the information, hey, we're replacing this person, or we've implemented this thing to make it better, because that could have ended badly had that person not been replaced with someone else. Because you're going to have those subcontractors come in, or employees come in that are not performing to the standards of the contract, but you as the person in charge of the contract will be affected by that. So your goal is to make sure that you assure that your employees, your subcontractors are performing to the standards. That is why the program was created, because it's not the government's responsibility to be on top of your employees and contract. You're the professionals providing a service. So your job is to ensure that your employees and subcontractors are representing your company in a good light and providing the services that that the agency has requested. So the quality assurance is the implementing processes to ensure that goods or services met required the quality standards, because you're going to get a report card on that. And by using corrective action plans to address deficiencies and should ensure continuous improvements. You should be having a plan, your quality assurance plans, which we discussed in a previous webinar. These are the things that's going to help you be successful and to maintain your contract, and then get that contract modification saying we would like to exercise an option year. So that's important. This is all this is we're doing is to maintain this contract, to show that we know what we're doing, and we would like for you to exercise that the next option year. Okay, so then the performance, so that's why it's incumbent upon you as the small business owner to really take stock of what is required of you when you say yes, because I've seen it too many times. Oh, we want to win a contract so bad. You've won the contract and now you're getting a termination letter in the mail. They want to do a termination because you have not been performing to the contract. You won the contract, but you didn't know what it was required to have this contract, because it's one thing to get a contract. It's another thing to keep it. It's another thing to perform the services that they're requesting. Now, key components of a corrective action plan, so that way you understand what they're looking for. Okay, so in the key corrective action plan, they're looking for the identification of the issue. So a detailed description of the performance deficiency or compliance issue. Okay, well, maybe you didn't deliver the carpet in time, or maybe you missed a carpet extraction for the quarter. Okay, now reference to the specific contracts terms. They're going to reference that specific contract term. Okay, here you said you were going to do it monthly, but it hasn't been done, or semi-annually, or whatever. And then they want to put the date the issue occurred. Now, because if this keeps happening, they're going to see that there's a problem. There's a problem in your back office, or there's a problem with your contract manager managing this contract. And then that's going to seem like you're incompetent and you're not able to perform the services. So this is what we do not want to happen. So now they're going to do a root cause analysis, an explanation why this issue occurred. Okay, once your identification of the contributing factors, was it resource constraints? Was it a process failure? Was it unforeseen circumstances? What was the reason and the issue for this? And then the corrective actions. Now, immediate step to resolve this current issue. Is it reperforming the task, replacing the equipment or the faulty equipment, or replacing, in my case, it was replacing a previous predecessor who had the role. They had to replace them because they were in danger of losing the contract because of the non-performance. So that is important to understand. How are we going to correct this action once the corrective action, because they're not giving you much time. They want this corrected immediately. Now, the timeline for the implementation. So, is it going to take you 30 days to hire someone new? Is it going to take you 10 days to get the new equipment to come in and to remedy this problem that we had? And then they want the specific details, okay? Because they're going to hold you to it. And then, is this a long-term corrective action? And then your milestones for tracking this. Has this been resolved, or is it still going to be reoccurring? Is it going to keep coming back? How are you going to mitigate that? Then the roles and responsibilities. Okay, the assignment of responsibility for how you're going to implement the corrective action. Okay, so you done wrote it down, you did everything. Now, how are we going to implement? And then the visual or team accountable for monitoring the progress. Although the COR is doing their part, you need to have someone on that's internal to you that's monitoring this, addressing and making sure the concerns of the government personnel, government employees or person or manager or who's ever in charge, that this has been remedied. Because when a customer is not happy with your services, 9 times out of 10, they're going to want to terminate the contract. So we do not want the contract being terminated, because it was hard enough to get the contract. Now, why would you do anything that would jeopardize you, losing the contract? And then the plan for verifying the corrections actions are completed effectively. So you're going to schedule some follow-up reviews, inspection by the contracting officer, and let them see that, yes, this has been remedied. And then once it's been you will follow up again to see, okay, has this reoccurred? Is this person still performing, or are they performing to the standard? Are you happy with the service now? So that way, at the end of the contract, you're not trying to fix the problems. You fixed it as they come along. So that way, at the end, you get exceptional ratings on your contract performance assessment report, your CPARs. And then once it's been acknowledged and you receive that signature saying it's been approved. And then as we get ready to close out the contract. So now let's talk about the closeout contract procedures. Okay, so you done did everything you're supposed to do. You've confirmed all deliverables. Now, this is the finalizing part of the contract closeout procedures. Now, what you're doing is, because the contracting officer is responsible for closing out the contract, but the prime contractor has their roles and responsibilities for administering and making sure that they have closed out the contract as well, by finalizing those administrative responsibilities after the contract completion and ensuring all terms were met. And so basically the steps are to just confirm all the deliverables, because proper contract closeout ensures that all contractor obligations were fulfilled. It avoids any post contract disputes, and then you use this to document lessons learned for future contracts. Now, many times we perform these contracts, we haven't did a SOP for the standard operating procedures on how we did this. We've built our repository of where we have all of our deliverables, and all this stuff needs to be in your contract closeout procedures as the prime contractor, because the contracting officer role is different than the role of the prime contractor, the contract managers, when you're getting ready to close out. Now you're going to make sure you settle out any outstanding claims or payments. You want to make sure you've received all of your payments. You want to make sure if you had some kind of claim in, that has been closed out. And then you will sign that release for claims, saying, hey, the contracting officer going to send your release for claims, saying we don't owe you anything else. So that way they can close out the contract. Now, what is involved in the contract closeout procedures? That's why I say you got to make sure you complete the performance and you archive the contract documents, because if you want to go bid on this contract again, you have a detailed post award, all the documentation for the post, because you won the contract. So you've done the pre-award, the post, now it was awarded, now you've done the post award, and now we're doing the contract closeout procedures. And this is a great template to use to go after future opportunities for janitorial services. And now, what's included in the contract closeout checklist? So I always build checklists for everything, because then the checklist can be the living document that you keep updating. And then once you close it out, you put the contract number, the contract closeout date. Then in the first section, you want to do deliverables. So basically, you want to talk about all the deliverables completed per the contract requirements. Because remember, we're going to use this when we go after a new contract for janitorial services. All the deliverables we did in this contract, and you basically mapping it back to the requirements, because we teach that in our coaching program too, about mapping everything, value mapping, because it's important to understand all the value that you brought to that. Is important that you document, and when you document, then you can move it on to when you're bidding on a new contract. So you document, then the final inspection conducted, and that the COR has accepted everything. So you address all concerns. There's nothing, no actions open. You've done everything that you're supposed to do to make sure this contract has stayed on task. Then your financial obligations. Some of the vendors, prime contractors who are not billing on time, that is a problem, because sometimes that interest can is you're supposed to pay interest if stuff is not being paid in a timely manner, and that could not be good for your contract. So you want to make sure you building timely, and then that your final invoices is submitted and approved. Then all payments are reconciled and confirmed. We had one company who had not billed for 2 or 3 months, and the only reason why we knew, because we had to send a notice to them letting them know, hey, what's going on, but the person had left and the assignment had not been moved to someone else, so that's why it had not got done. So that's why it's important to do all of your monthly reconciling of your accounts to make sure that there's nothing, because as the business owner, that is one of your day-to-day operations, to make sure that everything is being properly billed and approved and reconciled and confirmed that you have received payment. And then any outstanding claim or disputes resolved, and then the documentation. So for the final performance report submitted, so all required reports, deliverables submitted. So if you're having to do task logs, those photos, those quality control reports, that is stuff that you can use when you're bidding on another contract for the janitorial services. So you can see that this contract closeout is good for opening up. You made sure you had everything. So these are good artifacts to have for when you're going to bid on another contract. So this will be good information for the proposal writer. So whoever is your proposal writer and they're going out this requirement, it's good to have. So when they're putting together the proposal, that they'll have all the documentation, all of those, if you will, win things, or all of those things, those proof points to prove that, yes, we've done this before, and then document it in the proposal writing. So it's important that you do the contract closeout procedures, so that way you have a systematic process of way of closing out each contract and making sure that you fulfilled all of your obligations. And then you document, you archive all of this, so that way you can use it for, or you create boilerplate information for, and then customize it. They will use this information to customize in your proposal. And then the equipment and property. So if you have government furnished property, it needs to be returned or accounted for, and then make sure you get the document saying that you turned it in, because we have had instances where the contractor turned the government furnished property in, but then they didn't have the documentation to prove that they had turned it in. And you do not want to be charged for that. And then a contractor provided equipment has been removed. So if you were sitting on site and you had some equipment that you brought with you, make sure it has been removed before the contract has closed out. and then that they sign up on. Well, you just make sure you have it. And then the contractor's evaluation. Finally, the performance evaluation completed by the COR and the contracting officer, because this is going to be critical, because this is what they're going to look at when you're writing a contract for another proposal that you're going after. All right. So when you go after a new contract, they're going to pull up the old contract that you just worked at. Was it marginal? Was it exceptional services? Did they do what they said they were going to do? And then reach out to them. If they, sometimes they're going to want the past performance questionnaire to see exactly who was the POC who worked directly with this small business, so they can get some more insights. And then that feedback provided to the contractor for future improvement. You're going to use it for future improvement. Remember, we're using this for our lessons learned. Okay, what could we have done better? Okay, how could we make our systems and processes better? So when we go after, or if there's a recompete and you want to go after the contract to win it again, that you are showing to win again, because they like the work that you've done. You documented, you brought constant improvement, continuous improvement, just exceptional service delivery. They never have any complaints with you. And so that will assure, that are ways to ensure that you win the recompete, especially if the pricing, you already know the pricing because you won the last time, and you know what it takes to win because you won. But many times we get prime contractors, I've seen them get very complacent with their relationship with the government agency and start giving bad past performance. I mean, just really being mediocre, not really being exceptional, not really caring about the client. They're on to the next janitor contract. So they're not providing the government with what they need. And they go, and then next thing you know, they lost the contract. They didn't understand why. Well, because they hadn't did their due diligence. They hadn't did everything it was to make sure that they had gave exceptional services. And then the certification. The contracting officer will do the contract closeout certification saying that they have completed this. And so the contract closeout procedures is pretty much the last part of it. And before we get ready to go on our break, I want to give some time for questions, because I had a lot of stuff to go through and I wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything, and then give some time for some questions to make sure I answered everything.
Okay, thank you, Keisha. That was great. So yes, we have some time for questions before we do our break, go into our break. So if you have any questions, please type them in the chat box. There's one here from Tonya. She says, are you going to share a little about the value mapping tools and techniques that you provide to your clients?
Well, okay, so now the value mapping tools and techniques, that's more like with your counseling sessions, and every counselor has a different way of mapping those techniques and tools. But in the practical walkthrough, I'm just going to go over different because this training is more on contract admin and not more on the mapping of tools. That was more in the I believe it was more in the proposal level 2 training. So please check that out. And then if you want to talk to your counselor about more of those mapping tools and techniques, then they'll be able to help you with that, because that one is a different training altogether on how to do the mapping.
Okay, thank you. It doesn't seem like there are any other questions. So should we go into our break, Keisha?
Okay, before we go on our break, I wanted to make sure that everyone understood that when we're dealing with the contract admin, it's important to understand that the contract manager is the one who's going to be doing all the managing. So when we go over our practical exercise, so I'll just introduce the practical exercise and then we can be ready to go on to the break. Okay, so let me make sure I introduce that part. Okay, so in this practical exercise walkthrough, we're going to be reviewing a contracts management plan. So the contract management plan is just showing you what we're dealing with, what all the things that we just discussed at the beginning of the session, just showing you how to do that part. and each like I said, each session will be based on something because it's so much and it's a lot of information. We have to just do little portions, and so that's why this practical exercise will only focus on the contract management plan. And then as we have different webinars and trainings, we'll dive deeper into other things that can help. Okay, Yasmin, that's all I had.
Okay, thank you. So yes, we're going to go into a 5-minute break. So we will see you back in 5 minutes. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. All right, everyone. So let me go ahead and share my screen so we can go to the contract action plan. Let me pull it over there so you can see. Okay, so now the contract management plan sample, because you will get a copy of it, because I know everyone always want a copy of the handout, so you will get a copy of the handouts. And we will be going through everything on here. So let me take you back a little bit because I always have to start with the introduction. Okay, so the scenario is this is a janitorial contract that you've won. So this is the series that we've been working on with the proposal level 1, the proposal level 2. You've signed this contract. So let me blow it up so you can see it. All right, so this was a set aside for a small business. So remember, we had put all together the proposal. We put all our contract information in here. The contractor, you put your code in here, your phone number, all the information they asked for. Then you said you would be signing it. So you've signed it. The contracting officer signed it. You got your consulting your contract. So then once you receive your signed contract back, because I want to kind of like give you a basis of what you're looking at. And so I went and found a sample from what was it, DLA, so you can kind of see what information that will be in there. So let me show you that one as well. So because I have to give you the basic understanding so you know exactly what you're looking for. Okay, so let me see if that one populated. I think it closed. All right, so we have the solicitation because I wanted to show you the one that I had located from DLA. It was just a sample, so you can really look at the contract terms because it will be a little bit different, but it's basically for each agency the same, but they do use the same forms. Some of the federal agents are state totally different, but I want you to get an understanding. So we went after this opportunity. It was a firm fixed price contract. You signed the contract. They're telling you what to look at. They told you what the minimum requirements was. And because most of you, 64% of you really are having a hard time reading the solicitation and understanding the terms and conditions. So basically the terms and the condition, what you agreed upon. Okay, I agreed to do daily janitorial services weekly, and then going to deeper, you've signed everything. Okay, let me go because I want to get you back to the section so we can go over and then what you decided. Okay, so we said the period of performance was from 9/16/27 to 9/15/28, and we're providing custodial janitorial services. And our goal is to get them to extend those option years. You see, these are all option years. So you have the base, and that's why I said make sure you go back and look at the how to read a solicitation so that way you understand what you're looking at and all the different. So when I go over the contracts management plan, you know how to fill it out. So you will put your contract number in there, the contract, your company name, the value of the contract, because basically you're doing this for each one of your contracts because you need to know exactly what type of contract it is, what is the period of performance. So this one, we just saying January 1st to 2024, the scope of work, what if you have any modifications, anything of that nature, I'm going to outline it. So when you do the contract management plan, you outline how you will manage its contracts obligation for this janitorial services contract awarded for to maintain this federal building. So that's why it's important that you know how to read the solicitation, but it will be a contract award. So it will no longer be a solicitation to be a contracted award. I was trying to get a redacted janitorial service contract so you can kind of really see what is all involved in that. But I could not locate one or in the time for this training. So I was finding one for DLA. So if you go on to Google and then you click on sample contract award so you can see what a sample contract award look like, and just put a SF 1449 in there so that way you can see what it looks like, so you'll have a basis of what a contract looks like. And then once you have a basis of what the contract looked like, I wanted to see if I had saved that information on here. I apologize because I thought I had saved that information already for this training. Hold on, let me make sure. So that's the basic setup for this role. And I guess I did not save it for this training today. I apologize, team, because I really wanted y'all to see what a sample looked like, but I'll definitely have to add that in the future. And then you have the contract. And then you know that each section is about, so let me go to the section so you can just see what I'm talking about when I say contract terms. So you already agreed to the contract terms and conditions. Well, the contractor should only tender for acceptance of those items that conform to requirements of this contract. So when you say the terms and conditions, basically all you're doing is reading these to see what they're asking. Yes or no, I agree with this. And once you sign the contract, this is what you've agreed to. So when you're reading the contract terms, the government reserves the right to inspect, test any supplies or services that have been tendered for acceptance. The government may require repair, replacement, or not of non-conforming supplies, performance of non-conforming services at no increase in contract price because it was your fault. You see what I'm saying? So when you're reading the contracts, basically all you're doing is going through asking them, okay, what are they asking me? Making sure I agree to these terms and conditions, right? And if I have to repair, replace, or re-performance will not correct the deficiencies if not possible. But 9 times out of 10, it's possible to correct your deficiencies. And then if you don't, the government may seek an equitable price reduction or adequate consideration for acceptance of non-conforming services. Like it didn't perform. You didn't do what you were supposed to do. You said you were going to do this and you didn't do it. So the government must exercise its post-acceptance rights. Number one, within a reasonable time after defect was discovered or you didn't perform some kind of service, you should have been has been discovered. And before any substantial changes occur, all right, occurs in the condition of the item unless the change is due to a defect in the item. So basically all they're telling you, these are our terms and conditions. This is what you agreeing to. All right, the contract terms and commercial products and commercial services. So that's why I said sometimes we make it more difficult because there's a lot of words and a lot of languages. And a lot of jargon and a lot of different things that's going on in this. But if you understand the basics of it, then you can go through. So we know Section 2 is talking about the contract terms for commercial products and services and commercial services. And then if you have a dispute, this is what section. If changes in terms and conditions of the contract may be only by written agreement of the parties. That's when we're talking about the modifications and so forth and so on. So that's why I said, take your time, understand what's in each section. They give you definitions. They tell you what's excusable delays. All right. If it's an excusable delay, they tell you what's supposed to be involved in the invoicing. So that's why I said it's important to understand what's in the contract so you know how to prepare your contract management plan. Okay, so now we got the contract management. Okay, so what's the contract objectives? To ensure the building is clean, sanitary, and well maintained per contract's specifications. So that's when you're going to go back to the contract specifications. So then that's when you pull up that performance work statement that you've been working on, because it's going to be a part of your contract. And let me make this bigger so you can see the part of the contract. So this is part of your contract. They're going to put that in the contract, your performance work statement, because you have to know what you're supposed to be doing. And that is how you know what, okay, so we know that the contractor supply all personnel, equipment, supplies, facilities, transportation, tools, materials, supervision, and other items and non-personal services necessary to perform the general services as defined in the performance work statement. And you see, so that's why I'm telling you, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to give a good response. And then with a contract management and you're doing the plan, you can go in here, you just pull out the documentation so you can see exactly what they're asking you to do, what the objectives are, and all of that is in the how to read a solicitation. So if you need more help on how to read a solicitation and what is everything, that's when you go back to that training. But in this training, we're talking about contract administration. How do you maintain these contracts? How do you ensure that you have done everything that you're supposed to do? Now, ensure that you have identified each role, clarified who is performing each role. We've already found out who the contracting officer is. We already know who the contracting officer representative is, and then who the company representative. We did that in the instructional. Now, the posting orientation, the post-award orientation. So sometimes you can just go through, because I did also want to show you where the FAR regulation tells you where you need to go and address these issues. So you can go to the FAR subpart 42.5, and it will give you more information. But the PowerPoint slideshow is just to give you the basics, what everything is involved, when something changes, what is expected, and then how the prescription. So, we do everything by the Federal Acquisition Regulation. And so when you have, and then, good, it did pop up, the cleaning services contract. So this is a cleaning services contract out here. The home cleaning service agreement is dated, but this is not the SF 1449. So when you're dealing with federal, most times you will have the SF 1449, that form that I showed you. But when you're dealing with other if you like Maryland, Maryland Marketplace, Emma, their contract looks different. If you're dealing with Florida State, their contract looks different. And then when you go to Florida, even the agencies, so in the same state, they have a different contract. So understanding that what services you're providing, the time completion, and then the equipment payment, is all these different things. You can build your own boilerplate template so you know what right look like, and then how you're going to be able to answer when you're building this contract, the different contracts. Okay, so that's the FAR regulation. And then I have another one right here for you, service agreement. This is a janitorial service agreement. So let me blow it up to you. I found these on Google. So if you want to Google service agreements just to see what different types of service agreements are out there, you can go and Google. This is all on Google. And then let me show you the SF. I believe I did find the DLA one that I found for you all. Okay, here it is. So let me blow this up as well. And this is one for, I believe it's DLA. They were putting their sample contracts out here to you as well. This is the DLA Troop Support Directorate. And it was just a sample of showing you that they're going to put the NAICS code, standardization, and then what all entails in the contract. So that way you can kind of see what will be in the contract. They've done one for you. They've put information in here for you. So that way you can kind of know, because you don't want to be not informed. So you want to be able to know. They put notes in here. So that's why I say Google different documents in there so you can find good examples to use, and that will help you, because they do have a few on there. We Google everything else. And then So that's what I wanted to make sure I showed you. Okay, so now let me finish going back to the contract. I want to show you that as well. Okay, so the contract management plan. So I know I've covered a lot of things and different sections, but I wanted to make sure that we had a good training so you understand how it all comes together and where I'm getting the information from. So that way, when you're going back to create your documents, you know exactly what page to get it from. So like your contract objectives, you can get that from the solicitation, well, the contract award, and then you can get that from the performance work statement. So that way you can build it out. So then you can make sure that you complete all tasks on time and within budget. So you can put a table in there. What you're doing is building a document that you can use and refer to, so that way you can make sure you're managing the contract. The goal is to manage the contract. However you do the managing the contract is up to you, but I'm only giving you one way. There are many ways out there to manage contracts, and then to make sure that we're performing the exercise. Now, so say, for instance, your company missed a carpet extraction, and then how would you handle that situation? This is how you're going to handle all those different things, because you're just pretty much basically building a plan on how you're going to do everything. Now, the key roles and responsibilities, we talked about the government's roles, but then the contractor has roles. So I broke it out so that way you understand what the contracting officer roles is, but you also understand what the contracting officer representative role is, but then also what are your roles as a contractor, because you have to serve as the primary point of contact for the contracting officer representative and the KO or the CO, and that's the contracting officer. And what the contracting officer does, because they're the one who has been that's going to obligate the contract. And so that means they're the one going to be doing the modifications. They're the one who has the final say on can we do this modification or not? And then they have to go by the federal acquisition regulations to ensure that they have everything according to the regulations. But the contracting officer representative also have to oversee the daily performance, conducts the inspections, and communicates with the company, right? So they're the one who's going to basically be dealing with you on the day-to-day operations. And that's why we wanted to make sure that we went over the contracting officer representative, because many times they will try to reach out straight and go to the contracting officer. No, you have to go through if they're assigned as the person on your contract as the contracting officer, that's who you need to go to. That is the person who's going to approve the invoices and review the weekly performance reports. Okay, now the contractor roles. Let's focus on the contractor roles. Okay, now the contractor roles, the contract manager serves as the primary point of contact for the COR and the KO, well, the CO. And then you oversee the performance, you address any issues, you ensure compliance with the statement of work, or if it's a performance work statement, whatever it is, the scope of work, because sometimes we call names interchangeably, but the basis is you got to make sure you're doing what the contract says. You got to ensure that you've went to the contract, you know what the contract says. They're already telling you what. Let's go to that section. Let me go to that section so you can see exactly, because you always have to have the quality control plan, which we discussed in the previous training webinar series, and that's in the different proposal trainings. And then the quality insurance. The quality insurance the government shall evaluate the contractor's performance under the contract in accordance with the quality assurance surveillance plan. So they also have, and that should be included in the award, the contract award, and it tells you where you should be focusing. But let me get to where you're going to be putting your deliverables, so that way you know exactly. And then of course, the recognized holidays, hours of operations. Let me go to that. so you can have a basis of what you're looking at. So that's why I tell people it's a way to just dissect the contract a little bit at a time, looking at the performance work statement, understanding what they're asking before you move on. Like this one is asking for special qualifications, and then you have to insert those qualifications. So that's what's going to be in the contract, everything that you've put in that proposal. And then when they send you back that contract, that's your agreement for those terms and conditions. And then the post-award conference that we were talking about, and the contractor agrees to attend any post-award conference convened by the contracting activity or the contract administration office. And that is to make sure that you're clear on what you've been asked. That's why this is, when you're doing your proposal writing, it's important to include those things in your pricing. Because say the contract was in the state of Florida and you have to fly to Florida, so you want to be included that pricing in there. So that's why it's important to know what's in your contract, know what you're proposing, and know what they're asking you to do, because they're telling you these meetings shall be at no additional cost to the government. So that should have been in your contract. So then we're going to go, because I want you to see. So they're just telling you who the key personnel's, and then the contractor shall provide that contract manager who will be responsible for the performance work, the performance of the work. So that's why I tell you, what you're doing is you pulling all this information out and you put it in your contract management plan so it's easy for you to identify the stuff. So you don't have to keep going back to the contract, pulling everything out. You've pulled all the meat out. You've put it in your document for the contract manager to manage the contracts, and then to make sure you're doing the performance monitoring. And so if any contract modifications need to, so if they add any new services, you will know how to make sure that that information's been put in that document. So this is where you're getting all the information, the name of the person, and if you have an alternate, who shall be acting for the contractor when the manager is absent. So you have to identify who's going to be that person. So if you don't have anyone and then the person is out, how are they going to get a hold to you? So that's why it's important. And then what times do we have to be available? It's from 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. So who do you have designed for that? And of course, we're closed on holidays. And then they're telling you what the qualification of that person. So whoever you select, that contract manager shall have experience in supervision and a coordination of government or commercial janitorial contract management. Totally, this one only asks for 1 year. So long as that person, so if you have to replace that person, the minimum requirement is 1 year. So whoever's going to take that role needs to have that information. And then they're asking you, because all of this is going to be in that contract. Okay, so let's keep going through it, because I don't want to run out of time. And they're just telling you the identification of the contract employees. So if you have employees, they want to have all this information. But if you have contractors, they're going to have that information. They're telling you that contract travels not applicable, any other direct costs not applicable. So that's what they're telling you. So then right here in the phase in and phase out period, should be addressed in our contract management plan, because sometimes you're winning a contract that it was a recompete. So that means you have to have that transition with that contractor. So that would be a good thing to add in your contract management plan, because you want to know that you've completed that. Okay, if applicable, because it's not for everybody. And then what's your time period? Is it 60 days, 30 days? What is it? So just be familiar with this information, because when the contract starts, they're going to want you to hit the ground running. They're not waiting for you to catch up, because that's your role. And of course, they define everything. So if you have a question about that, you will go here. But we want to get to and there's government furnished property. We talked about that. And then the contract furnished property. So everything we discussed in this training has been like I said, we've been through the series. So that way you make sure that you have a basis on what's being asked of you. Okay, so now these are the specific tasks. This is what we were talking about. And then just a little bit. So these are the tasks that you are going to be completing, right? So we want to put those tasks in here. And I always recommend that you do them. You do a table because you want to know what it's going to be long. Sometimes you can put in an Excel spreadsheet or whatever, however you want to do it, and then you can embed it in here, or you can just have it in an Excel spreadsheet, so that way you know the deliverables, the 100% errors clean with no visible trash. You know, what's your target, what is the performance measures, all of that is in your performance work statement. So when you're completing this for your contract ad manager, because all of this is to help the contract manager do their role and their job, and to know what needs to be done, and then how much. Okay, so this contract is 60 square feet, right? So then you know exactly, then they got all the reference tables and all of this information in here for you to build the frequency. So that's why I said, if you put it in a table, uh Excel spreadsheet table, it will make it easier for you to do the contract management or building that checklist. You use this to build the checklist, so that way it's easy to manage. Okay, it's for the month of November. So we're in November. So the first week of November. If it's per week, then you know you need to have those tabs in there. So that way, when you send out the sheets or the different things for the person who's doing the management, they can check to see if this is actually being done. So if it's conducted twice a week for May to October, then you need to make sure May through October that is getting done. But if it's once per week from the 1st of November to the 31st, then you know the checklist needs to be adjusted. So that's why it's important to understand, when you're doing this, you need to be reading what are they asking you. So the kitchen and drinking fountain area, they're telling you what areas and how much and when. So from May to October is twice a week. But when you go to 1 November to 31st, it's just once per week. So that'll let you know, okay, well, we only need one person from this month. And then so that way your employees, you'll know how to let them know, hey, we want to be using you for this for 1 November to the 31st of April, you know, so then you can manage your costs, because you don't want to have people on the payroll when you're not needed, or they're not needed because of that time frame. Things have slowed down, so that it's not as much going on, so it's slowed down. So that's the things you need to consider when you're doing your contracts management, and all of this is in the statement of work. Okay, and then if any regulations or stuff that you need to be aware of, then you will put that also in your contracts management plan. And then we already put the inspection schedule on here. So you have to know what the inspection schedule is. Like I said, you're doing your weekly inspections that go out each week, and the CR conducts the site inspections to ensure compliance with the KPIs. And then so what success looks like, it's complying with all the FAR clauses and contract terms are met. And how you're going to do that is making sure but you see, it's very simple and easy to go through this contract, but some will be more complex. Some will have more exhibits. So you have to do the necessary work in advance, so you know what you're looking for. You know where all the FAR clauses are. You know where, because you've done it through repetition. So the first time it's going to be a little bit more challenging. And as you continue to win more contracts and then work through from pre-award all the way to post-award, you'll start developing rhythms on how you will go after different contracts, which ones you should go after, and the basics of the contract, when a contract modification should be done. Then the next thing is on-time deliverables. Tasks are to be completed on time within the agreed upon time frame. So these are some of the things and these are just the attachments that they have. And if you want to add that to the contract management plan, so that way you know, and like you see, they do everything within the tables because it's easier to document. And then if you want to add a new table, just saying, okay, so this is how they're going to make sure safety, uh, and this is the contractor. So the performance requirements summary is the contractor service requirements are summarized into performance objectives that relate directly to the essential items. The performance threshold briefly describes the minimum applicable levels of service required for each requirement. So this is telling you right here, they want 100% compliance. They're going to do periodic sampling. The physical security, all employees complete the NACI or FBI, National Criminal History Fingerprint Check. So that's why I say it is important that you have read the terms and conditions, understand what they're grading you on. What is required is they want 100%, because everyone needs to have a criminal background check. That's 100% because of the safety. That is very important. And then the key control, they're telling you the method of how they're going to surveillance to make sure that you are managing the contract, right? How they're going to surveillance it is through the direct supervision for the criminal history fingerprint, but they're going to do customer feedback for all keys, access cards, codes remain uncompromised with no loss of physical cards or keys. So that is by customer feedback. So being aware of how they're going to grade you definitely helps. And then the they telling you direct observation. The contractor shall report all applicable personnel changes of key personnel. So if you've listed that person as a key personnel, they want to know when you change that person. So say that that person had to leave and go take another job, or say that person was on as a reservist and had to get activated for duty, then you will have to fill that role with another person. So then you have to send them, and they're telling you right now, all new employees are reported at least 7 days prior to beginning of work. They want to know who's coming in that organization. So the reporting of terminations, resignations, reassignments is critical because that could make you lose your contract. So this is all about all important for the contract administration of the contract. Also, this helps us to control costs because by you being able to project all the different requirements and how they're able to do this will let you know about your back office. Do you need a full-time assistant on board, or do you just need someone part-time? You understand what I'm saying? So this is critical to understand. Now, the effective communication by clearly documenting, you see exactly what is being asked of you. The identification of the contract employees. The contractor must maintain and display government issue identification while on site. So if this requirement requires you to be on site, then you must have identification, and no more than 5 reports in 1 calendar year. So they want to make sure you're actively escorted. So this one, you will be escorted on this requirement. So that is important to know. So when you're building your contract management plan, those are some things that you want to know. And that could be in the performance and monitoring matrix. So everything that we've established from the beginning when we started on the contract administration, it's important that you understand which part and what section. So I always recommend that when you're attending these different webinars, and if you have any questions or you need more clarification in a section, so say you're not understanding everything about the performance monitoring and matrix, then you will put a note in that section. When I am able to speak or speak to my procurement counselor, I'm going to bring up these issues I still have questions on the performance monitoring matrix, or if I need to discuss something in detail, or if I need to watch another training to understand the performance monitoring and what matrix should I be recording, because that's going to help you to understand where you have it figured out and where you don't. So if you need help with the inspection schedule, then you need to be putting, okay, so what, because most of my clients are new to government contract and they have no clue on how to do an inspection schedule. They don't know how to do reporting or setting up the reports for the cleaning. So say this one was Clean Pro. They were going to submit their report every Friday. So weekly reports have to be submitted by every Friday, but who's submitting that weekly report? Who's making sure that gets done? So that's why it's important that you go out and identify who's doing what, when they're doing it, and who's going to check to make sure it got done. Because you could have thought the contract manager was going to do it, but in fact, it was supposed to have been somebody else's design because the contract manager was out. So they have designated someone else for that week, and then that report hadn't got submitted, and that will affect your CPARS rating, the contract performance assessment report, because that is your what you've done for the contract. So it's important that we understand those different things. So when you're understanding, interpreting the contract terms and conditions, you see if you take each section and break it down, you can understand exactly what they're asking. What are they asking me for in this section? So it's very, so that way you break it down in bite-sized pieces, and then you're able to answer all of the questions in a systematic way. Okay. And then for those who were, I'm just new to contract management, unsure where to start. This is where you start. You start with building your, but if you haven't even won a contract, then you have to go back to the beginning. You have to learn how to read and understand a federal or state solicitation. Then you have to be able to write a proposal response. How are you going to articulate all of this information to those agencies? Then you have to know how to do the costs. If you don't know how to do the costs, how can you manage the costs? You're not going to be able to control the costs because you didn't know what your projected budget was. Then you don't know, because many times our small business deal with a lot of unexpected overruns because they didn't account for the weekly inspections. They only brought on one contractor when they really needed two, or they brought on two contractors, but they really only needed one. So that's how they get the cost overruns. And that's what we want to avoid, especially when you're a new small business getting started in government contracting. You have to learn those nuances and those little foundational steps before you get to the contract, because this training series is all about, okay, we've won the contract. What do we do next? You see, so that's why I wanted to make sure you understand and to clarify that each part of this series has drawn upon the previous training. So that way you understand that this didn't just happen. It's just a couple of series. And I had to walk you through the steps so you understood how we got to managing the performance and monitoring the contract, and what matrix should we be looking at. And you get that information from the performance. Let me go back to the top so you make sure you have that in the video. So when you reviewing your notes, you know which section you got that from. And in this, it's the Techno Exhibit 1. So this is the performance requirement summary. They will not all be in the same order. I'm telling you, each agency has done it different. I've worked for DOD. I've worked in DISA. I've worked at the Mission Installation Contracting Command. And I'm telling you, each agency has a different format, a different way of presenting the information. So that is why we always recommend that you start with one agency first, learn how they're presenting their information and how they will like for you to compose a proposal. And then that will help you to establish a foundation with that agency. So if you go to a different agency asking for a different format, then you will be, okay, this is easy. Okay, so I've saved all these information in one folder. Okay, so let's finish on with the performance requirements summary. All right, now the contractor furnished items. The contractor will utilize EPA identified green cleaning products as reference within the contract. So they've already told you, and you only have 90%. And then they're telling you this will be random sampling. So they're going to be randomly sampling all of your items to make sure that you're adhering to those requirements. And then and it goes on. So that's why I said, if you go ahead and build your contract management plan on how the contract manager and the alternate contract manager plans to manage the contract. But as the business owner, your job is to manage your employees. Or if you are the business owner and the contracts manager, then you know exactly what you're looking for and what they expect of you, how they expect it of you, what needs to be done. And you use this as a checklist. You build your checklist. That's why I tell every small business, we want templates. Yes, I know you want templates, but you have to customize each template according to the contract. So having a boilerplate content to get started, but you're going to have to customize each one for each requirement, because each requirement has different requirements. Some may say we want clean 3 times a week or 5 times a week. So, you know, that's full-time automatic. If they're asking for it all throughout the day, or maybe they only want you to come in the mornings and afternoons, or maybe they want you to come throughout the day because of that traffic. There's so much traffic that's coming in and out that they have to keep someone there on site continuously. So that's going to change the pricing. So you know the pricing will go up. And so that's why it's important to really take time out and review and understand how you're going to manage this contract so you win more contracts. Many times, the small business come new to government contract, they didn't understand what the requirements was asking, and then the contract was not renewed. And they didn't understand because they wanted a debrief to find out, okay, well, why didn't we win this contract? Well, the reason why you didn't win the contract is because you didn't adhere to the performance work statement. You didn't create those different compliance, how you plan on managing this contract and ensure that you get a positive performance review, because the government agency is satisfied with your deliverables. This will lead to potential option year renewals and future contracts. And if you're doing a very good job, then they're going to ask you to come back. But if you're not doing a very good job, they're not going to ask you to come back. And so our goal as a small business owner is to effectively communicate that to the contracting officer, the program manager, the contracting officer representative, that we have clearly documented communication between us, that we are adhering to the standards, we've read the requirement. So my goal is, I'm hoping that you understand how this all plays into creating your contract management plan and then the reporting, because they'll send you, if they do not send you a template of a monthly summary report, because I've had that happen to me. They wanted a monthly summary report, but then they didn't give me a monthly summary report to create. So I had to create it. So that's why we're teaching you how to fish, not just giving you the fish. Because how about you go to an organization that doesn't have a monthly summary report and they want you to create one? So now you have to go in there, create the report. Okay, what are they asking for in that monthly summary report? And then you will create that report from the information that they're asking you for, because that's going to have to accompany the invoice, because the invoice is telling me, okay, we performed this service this month, but what did we do in that month? Because they want to make sure they're getting their bang for their buck too. They want to making sure that you're not just sitting on the clock and not doing anything. They want to make sure that you understand, and then the level of detail of the work being completed. And so that's why I always tell my small business, you have to develop one, have a generic monthly summary report, and then ask them, would you like, so when you send it out the first month, you can ask, hey, was this report sufficient? Do you want me to add more information? Is there something that we're missing? And then you know exactly how to deal with that agency. You're not guessing, or they've been wanting other information. However, they haven't articulated, but you thinking you're doing what they're asking, but in actuality, you're not. So that's important to understand that when you first get started, developing that monthly status report and making sure that you so that way you can get paid in a timely manner. Now the communication plan, how did they say we're going to? So then we have two different ones. You got the internal communication, that's between you and your employees, your subcontractors, how you want to deal with stuff. But then you have your external communication. So ensure that you have an internal communication plan and then an external communication plan on how you're going to be dealing with this. We're going to have daily team huddles to review tasks and address issues. Are you going to do weekly, once a week, on Mondays, and every Friday close out the contract? The week, saying, hey, do we have any issues that we need to address? Because you want to make sure you capture as much information from this contract and make sure you mitigate any issues immediately, because that is going to affect your contract assessment, your contract performance assessment report. You do not want this affecting that. And then if you do have the weekly status meetings between the contracts manager and the operations supervisor, or the foreman, or whatever they call it, program manager, they're going to call it a different name for everything. So just be clear of who is the person who you're going to be communicating with. Now, if it's external communication, the contract managers provide weekly progress reports. Now, on a contract that I was on one time, they didn't want the weekly progress status report. They just wanted the monthly status report. So we didn't have to do the weekly performance report. We only had to do the monthly status report. So how I mitigated that, so I wouldn't be at the end of the month trying to do that, I kept my weekly report. And sometimes what I found when I got very busy, I would have to keep a daily report. And then at the end of the week, I would summarize everything in my weekly report. So at the end of the month, I will have everything documented and prepared for the program manager or the operations supervisor. And then my day was easy. I got everything done. I didn't have to remember what I did last 3 weeks, because we can barely remember what we ate yesterday. So how I'm going to try to remember all the tasks I completed, because in the end, as a subcontractor, as an employee, you still have a performance report that you have to do. So you want to make sure that you see that you are excelling. So when you ask for that raise or for that bonus, or if you raise your prices, that you're worth every penny, because they see that you bring value. We hired you as a business development specialist. You came in here and you exceeded the standards, and then that would warrant you to get a raise. But many times we don't document any of this information. We don't document, then we ask for a raise, and then we wonder why, or they just let us go because we haven't added value to the company. We've brought nothing. So that's why it's important to have these communication plans, document the monthly summary report, because that will assist you when you're building your performance assessment report at the end of that month, of that quarter, or the annual for that year. If you're an employee, but if you're a subcontractor, you want them to bring you back on again, you see, or a teaming partner of some sort. You want to be brought back on to the contract. And then we talked about the external communication, just ensuring that you immediately notify the COR of any issues or any risks. And then if they have the quarterly performance reviews with your KO, or your CO, contracting officer, or your contracting officer representative, make sure you do those so you can see. You would just save you so much time, and not finding out at the end of the performance period to be renewing the contract. You find out they didn't even like anything that you've been doing, and you hadn't really addressed any issues, so they don't feel the value to exercise the option here. So now we're going to talk about the documenting record keeping. So now the performance records, now inspection reports, make sure you keep everything on file. Keep everything, document, because that's going to protect you. That's going to show you yourself doing a self-assessment of your company. Where are you? How are we doing? Are we performing at the standards? Should we improve in something? Should we make changes? How many corrective action plans do we have? Have we been getting in trouble a lot? Because that's going to be those warning indicators. Remember how when that car's acting up, you start seeing that check engine light come on. Those warning indicators that you chose to ignore and not address, but they could have been addressed early, and that way you can make a change and show the customer that you are in the service, exceptional service business. And then your invoices. Make sure your invoicing is like you're supposed to. I was on the contract administrative team. Many of my small business would not invoice correctly. They wouldn't even tell me what month the invoice was for. All those different things that the contracting officer, then guess what? We got to reject that invoice. So now you're not getting paid until you fix that invoice. So ensure that you're including the support documentation, such as if it's a weekly report, a monthly report, the task logs, identifying which contract it is. I've had small businesses send in a contract, invoicing for another. They have several contracts, but they didn't put which contract they were invoicing on. So you have to make sure you put in all those detailed information that they're requesting, so that will avoid your invoices not being processed in a timely manner, because you have to pay your staff, you have to pay your team, and you have to pay yourself. So you definitely want to make sure your invoicing procedures is up to standard and they're going through on the first time, and giving them the information they need. Modifications, maintain all your copies of your modifications, even if it's unilateral, even if it's administrative mod. You want to know how many times this contract has been modded, and making sure that you have implement those modifications. So they added that sanitation in there. So you've added the sanitation into that contract, so you know exactly that you are doing everything. And then the document closeouts. Make sure you submit that final performance report. Ensure all your deliverables are completed and resolve all outstanding issues. And then part of the invoicing and payment plan, I want you to make sure. So I had a company that their commercial policy was to invoice at the end of the month. However, the contract says you're going to invoice by the 5th of the month. Which one do you think you're supposed to be doing? You invoice when they tell you to invoice for that customer. If that customer requires that you invoice on the 5th, then please invoice on the 5th and not the previous month's invoice. You know what I'm saying? So that way you get paid in a timely manner, and then you can pay your employees and your subcontractors in a timely manner. So please adhere to the invoicing instructions. So make sure you know how they're telling you. If it's on the 15th, invoice on the 15th. This is the 5th, invoice on the 5th. Invoice, if they say 30 days, then you invoice in that net 30 days. So just understand the approval processes, how the COR will review and approve those invoices. Does it take 10 days? Does it take 20 days? What is those milestones in those days? And then finally, the contract closeout. We talked about that in depth in the practicum when I first started for the instructions, the contract closeout plan. Have a contract closeout plan. And so the way I do everything, I have a checklist. If it's a contract closeout plan, it's going to be a contract closeout plan checklist. So that way I know, because in government contracting, we had to do what's called the paperless contract files. And when you're updating and say, I have to give this contract over to another contracting officer because I'm leaving, or I'm PCS, because in the military, you're constantly permanent moving to a new location. So now you want to leave those different contracts on someone. So that's why it was important that I document the records. Well, it's the same thing when you're a prime contractor. You're going to have employees that's going to be replaced or resign, or something had happened, and then you have to get someone in. If you're not documenting your files correctly, how can that person pick up where that individual left off? That's going to mean a longer time frame of getting spun up and onboarding these clients. And then you wondering why the work is not getting done. Well, the information is not there for them to do their job. So that's why I say when you do those contract closeout, make sure you put all the required services in. include all the assessments, anything. So like this one, the include the last quarterly carpet extraction if that is what is due. Whatever it is, make sure it's in there. And then conduct a walkthrough with the CRO to confirm all tasks are complete. So your exit interview, if you will. Okay, we're done. We've done everything. Is there anything outstanding? Because you don't want to close a contract out to find out there was something that you missed and no one said anything and no one inquired of why it wasn't done. And then finally, the final documentation. Submit all your required reports, including those final performance summary and invoicing. And if you do these things, and then as you build this contract, is a living document. You're going to add things, you're going to take things away. Say the contract is a little bit more complex, then you have your simplified acquisitions contract management plan, but then you have your RFPs, because this one is more complex, it's asking for technical reviews and so forth and so on. So this is a living document, but long as you know where the federal acquisition regulation tells you to go get this information, you will be successful. Now, I want to leave these last 5 minutes for questions, because many times we don't have any questions because you don't know what you don't know. But as you continue to get these questions, please, please reach out. And then you can always reach me on LinkedIn, and we go from there. All right, that's all I have, yes.
Thank you, Akeisha. Excellent presentation as always. So yes, as Akeisha says, we have a couple of minutes left. So if you have a question or if you'd like Akeisha to go over anything she mentioned, please put it in the chat box. There's a couple of questions here. First one is, does your contract manager have to be a W-2 employee like your facility officer is required to be, or can they be 1099?
Well, it depends. Okay, so what is your business model? So the way I see it is, it's an employee if you want to manage everything they do. An employee is normally we're gonna tell them what to do, how to do it, when to do it, what to do. But if you want a subcontractor or that 1099, because I didn't want to manage anyone. I wanted to manage myself and then have subcontractors who were expert in that field manage that. So if I give them the scope of work, just like you do anything. You give them the scope of work and you say, hey, I want you to be my contracts manager to manage my contracts. This is what I expect from you. I want a monthly status report or a weekly, because you don't want to wait a whole month for subcontractors. You want to know exactly what's going on. So you tell them what you want, just like the government tells us what I want, and then you assign you if they're not meeting that standard. So you can do both. It's up to you, your business model. If you want to work with subcontract, but remember, when you say you have subcontractors, the agency wants to know that you got subcontractors, and basically they kind of want to know what they're doing. It depends, because some contracts, the way it's written, it'll say, do you have subcontractors? And if you do, who are they? Basically, right? But then and then sometimes they want to go into depth. They want you to upload their resume or something about them. It depends on the contract, you see? So, but my business model is I believe in subs, because I practice what I preach. I want to work with other team and partners. I want to build. And the only way a small business can grow is to have other team and partners and subs to work. Yes, you can have your employees, but it's nice to have your subcontractors who the subject matter expert in that field, so you can do both. It's whatever your business model is.
Okay,
Okay, the next
thanks.
one, Yasmin.
Yes, there's one more question.
Okay.
And I think that's pretty much it.
Oh.
When you're serving as a subcontractor on a federal contract, what and how much information should you expect the prime to share?
Okay, well now that's a good one too. Well, I'm gonna tell you right now, because I've been a subcontractor on several contracts. The prime doesn't always share information, because remember, it's like the competimees or teamemies or whatever they call it. One minute you their subcontractor, then in the next minute you're their competitor. You're the prime going after this contract. So sometimes they don't share a lot of information, so you have to glean from as much as possible, and from the flow down clauses for when they give you your contract as a subcontractor, and then constantly probe for answers, because they're not going to give it to you, because they're kind of risk averse, because this happened before. You'll have a subcontractor come in, and then the next thing you know, they're the prime contractor. They didn't took the contract from the prime contractor. So they're not going to always be forthcoming with all that information, but they are to give you the scope of work, what your roles and responsibility, and then those flow down clauses that come with that. So if you're like me, I was the subject matter expert of acquisition. So everything I had to get the scope of work for the acquisition professionals, all those different things, so that way I could do my job. And then remember when we went over the performance requirements, you need to know what your performance requirements are so you can fulfill that to the prime. And you're not dealing with the agency. Remember, you're only dealing with the prime if you're a sub, because they're the ones who are responsible to talk straight to the agency, because they're not going to give you a lot of time at the beginning, especially when they don't know you and this is the first time they've worked with you. Okay. I hope that helped.
That was a great explanation. So one last question and then we'll wrap up. When it comes to procurements, if an authorized seller is required as a prime, can you subcontract to another company that is an authorized reseller? Most beginning companies cannot get that status.
Well, the only bad part I'll say about that is, because remember, they're going to make you give a copy of your authorized reseller agreement. So they're going to look at that name on there, who's going to be the prime and who's going to be the authorized reseller. So it's depending on the contract. And because one contract we worked on, they wouldn't allow for the resellers. They only wanted the authorized seller, no resellers. They just wouldn't take them. So it depends on the contract and the wording of the contract to let you know, because almost that kind of seems like you're trying to be the prime, but you're not positioned to be the prime, but you want to use them as the prime because you don't have that past performance. And then they're normally recommend you be the prime, the subcontract, and let them prime, and then eventually you'll be able to become the prime. So it depends on how the contract is written, because sometimes they won't even allow it. It depends on the contract.
Okay, well, we finished right on time. Excellent. Thank you so much, Akeisha. As always, very detailed, comprehensive presentation. I'm so glad that we record these so you can watch them again. And thank you all for participating and asking questions. I'm sending out the handouts to you, and a link to the recording will be available this afternoon, later today. And of course, you have our YouTube channel that has all our previous recordings. And if you are looking for one-on-one assistance, please reach out to your Apex Accelerator counselor. So thanks again, and we will see Akeisha next month. Next month, she's going to be delivering a class on, I think it's teaming.
Yes, the teaming, partnering.
Teaming and partnering.
Yes.
So that'll be a good one. So make sure you sign up for that. All right. Thanks again. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.